All right, well, here we go. Happy Earth Month, everybody. Thank you for joining us for some teach-ins here live on YouTube. And of course, it'll also be recorded, so you can come back and catch things if you need to step away or you need to come back. But here we are with some teach-ins for Earth Day. So my name is Krista Bailey. I have been lucky enough to teach this class at IU South Bend. It's called Measuring Sustainability. So it's looking at tools that are available across a variety of industries and different topics on how we can track what success we have in doing things more sustainably. So you'll be hearing from the students about the topics that they've chosen, which are based on some issues that we've identified, some sustainability challenges, as it were. And they'll be identifying some solutions that they've discovered and some tools that we can use to show that it's working and to keep us on track. So some of this will be locally relevant and trackable, and some of it will be related to bigger, broader issues. I will be watching the chat here on YouTube, so if you do have questions, I invite you to post them. We'd love to answer them. Take a few minutes after each presentation to answer those questions. So please post those there. Otherwise, I get to ask more questions, which I will. But we'd love to hear from you, any feedback or comments or questions that you might have for us. So that said, we're going to be switching screens around quite a bit, so let me try out the first screen that I want to share with you, and that is our schedule for tonight. So let me pull that up. Boom. Yeah. So tonight we've got several presentations. It looks like 6 altogether. And here is the general schedule for that. So we're going to start with hearing about gardening for wildlife, then about plastic, then food waste, then the Campus Pride Index, and the importance performance analysis, which I think you'll find very interesting. I've never heard of it before. And Verma Composting, also very interesting. Maybe you don't know that word either, but you will soon. So that said, we're going to start off just a quick round of introductions so you can see who all is here tonight, and then we'll let the teach-ins begin. So again, Krista Bailey with IU South Bend's Sustainability Studies program, and this is the graduate seminar called Measuring Sustainability. So Elizabeth, would you like to kick it off, and then we'll kind of unmute as we move through so we're not too clustered on the screen.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Samara, and my project is about gardening for wildlife, which is a National Wildlife Federation designation. And what that does is it helps you you make your yard more wildlife friendly, and yeah, makes your yard more wildlife friendly. And the photos that are part of the slideshow are all they're all my photos from the wildlife area that I've created, and the little baby birds and all of those things and all the wildlife that's shown up has actually moved into the plants that I planted, so the trees and the things. So it's been really fun to track that in my own habitat area. So yeah.
Thank you. I think we'll hear next from Mary. You want to introduce yourself real quick and we'll move on through?
Hi everyone, my name is Mary LaViolet, and my project that I'm going to discuss tonight is single-use plastic bags and ways that they are impacting the environment and things that we can do as consumers to decrease the problem.
Wonderful. I think Stephanie.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Sword. I did my research on food waste and some strategies on how we can reduce that on college campus.
Great. And Alexis, tell us about yourself.
My name is Alexis Barton. This semester I did my research on the Campus Pride Index, which is a measurement tool for examining and assessing LGBTQ affirming policies in the higher education setting.
And after that, we'll hear from Gabby, but tell us about yourself, Gabby.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle Crutcher. I did my research on the importance performance analysis. The tool was originally created to research find the strengths and weaknesses of corporations in order to give better customer satisfaction and information on better management strategies.
All right, and Jeremiah is going to be wrapping things up for us this evening. Why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, my name is Jeremiah Sult. I'm a sustainability champion. I received my bachelor's degree in sustainability in 2016. I'm currently on track working on my MLS with a graduate certificate in strategic sustainable leadership. My presentation tonight will be on Verma Composting. Thank you all for attending.
Wonderful. Okay, so a great group, as you can see. Been a lot of fun to be exploring these tools and topics with them this semester, and really excited to share with you the work that they've been doing. So let's dive into it. So we're going to start with Elizabeth. So let me pull up her information for you. All right, so this is our class blog. It's got a listing of the agenda here. I'm just going to start right at the top. I've already pulled some things up, but as I move this over, Elizabeth, you have anything to say to introduce us before I hit play?
This is the third PowerPoint ever and the first time I've recorded one. So there you go. So it's, yeah, good luck. There you go. Hope you enjoy it.
And I know we have sound on here. Sorry about that. We'll get that rolling here in just a moment. Well, I'm not sure what happened to the sound. Everything was playing earlier. I checked it all. Is anybody hearing anything?
Is there an option in Zoom to play system audio?
the IT part of Zoom says to make sure your device is unmuted, click share screen, click advanced, select music or computer sound only, and then play the file you wish participants to hear.
So I'm hearing it play. I think it's going through on YouTube somehow. I'm going to start it again. Sorry about that. It is working.
Do what Jeremiah said. There's a
I am
really important to just start small. The two pictures on your screen are before and after from the yard that I live in. When I moved in, it was a big soccer field. There was nothing in the front yard except grass. So little by little in the vertical picture, I've been adding plants. Really important to just start small. The two pictures on your screen are before and after from the yard that I live in. When I moved in, it was a big soccer field. There was nothing in the front yard except grass. So little by little in the vertical picture, I've been adding plants. Really important to just start small. The two pictures on your screen are before and after from the yard that I live in. When I moved in, it was a big soccer field. There was nothing in the front yard except grass. So little by little in the vertical picture, I've been adding plants. Really important to just start small. The two pictures on your screen are before and after from the yard that I live in. When I moved in, it was a big soccer field. There was nothing in the front yard except grass. So little by little in the vertical picture, I've works. So it's important to take before and after pictures. Google Maps helped me with the before picture because I couldn't find any of my before pictures. There's some great native plant finder sites, and the first one is the National Wildlife Federation, NWF/Native Plant Finder. And then there's the audubon.org/plants for birds. And both of those have really great lists of plants that you can print off. You can make a list and you can take those lists to the nursery, and then you can read the nursery tags and see, oh, I need a sunny spot plant or a shady plant. And some of it's trial and error. So if you're not really sure about a plant, before you go crazy spending a ton of money on them, try a couple and then see how they do in your yard. So you can replace existing plants with natives as your budget allows and space allows. And particularly, this is great if something dies, plant a native in its place. Again, you want to find some plants that increase carrying capacity. So if you have a limited space, to plant one tree, pick a tree like an oak or a serviceberry that they're good natives and they provide homes for lots of species. So your habitat doesn't have to be a jungle to help wildlife, and that should help with the neighbors so you don't upset your neighbors. And remember to have fun. This is a learning process. It can bring lots of enjoyment when you get out to look at your beautiful yard and all the creatures that come along. And it takes a little time too. So it won't happen overnight, but there's certainly some advantages to doing this for your own self and for the creatures. You may or may not decide to certify your yard through the National Wildlife Federation, but just in case you do decide to certify, you can also purchase a sign, which is kind of fun to have in your yard. And then it also is a conversation starter. I've been out working in my yard lots of times and folks have asked me about it and, the plants that I'm planting and then what the certification is all about. And I've also included their walkthrough checklist. You can download that at their website and you can go through your yard, but it offers a lot of different choices in each of the 5 essential categories. And I was really surprised when I first started. I thought, I don't have a ton of land and I don't have a creek running through there. How am I going to do these things? And they've really made gardening for wildlife accessible to folks, particularly in urban environments. And because the main thing is that we're planting what we can to help support pollinators and other wildlife. So it's doing what we can with what we have where we are. Particularly relevant for this time. 83% of U.S. land is privately owned, and we all have an important role to play as stewards of this land. Combining our individual efforts, yard by yard, really does make a positive difference for people, animals, and the environment. And I'll leave you with one of my favorite quotes from Jane Goodall. Every individual matters. Every individual has a role to play. Every individual makes a difference. You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we caught most of that. Some of it doubled up with the audio, so apologies for the technical difficulties there, but definitely caught gorgeous pictures and at least got to read some good content from everything. Elizabeth, anything maybe you want to add to that, or maybe something that we might have missed that you want to add in? I'm going to pull up and see if we've got any comments posted on YouTube.
Well, a couple exciting things are going on in the yard this spring. So there's 3 active birds' nests right now this spring. And I always like to, I just kind of go around and check and kind of see who's in there and what they're doing. But I had never seen a robin's nest. So I was checking, and one little robin's nest was all full of mud. And so this little robin had been, so I was reading about robin's nests, and it's really interesting. They make a cup nest, and then they line the whole inside with mud, and they press it down with their little beaks. So I had never gotten to see a nest like that in process. And then another one of the nests, I have big Great Pyrenees mixed dogs, and they have tons of blonde fur that looks like sheep. And so in another nest, there's dog fur all the way through the tree, and then there's fur mixed into the nest. So someone's been working really hard to warm up their nest with dog fur. So it's been really fun. Again, it's been really fun to just see who shows up in the yard, and it is a process. Little by little, you can make a difference in your area. Thanks.
Any questions from the rest of you for Elizabeth? And I don't see, people are just happy they finally got to hear all the audio and see the pictures, but I don't see questions from the viewers yet. And there are people
one thing
watching.
to add, I've been emailing with folks at the National Wildlife Federation, and I asked them if they had any sustainability reporting tools that they use, and they said they didn't. So they do their mapping, but they just kind of write down, say where the habitats are, and so they map a little point on a Google map for where the habitats are, because I was looking at other certified habitat communities, but they don't actually have other kinds of sustainability reporting tools. And she said, oh, that's such a great idea. And then it was interesting but there's some neat resources that would make sense. Like there's one called iTree, and you can put in, you go there and you can click the trees in your yard, or if you're thinking of planting a tree, and depending on the direction that the tree is and the size of the tree and the species, it will tell you about the carbon that it captures, the amount of like the way that it'll make a difference for your electric or gas bill, your so that's kind of that was kind of a neat resource. And then there's some other mapping tools that are out there that other organizations are using all the time, and to kind of put together the habitat connectivity, because species really do need a larger space, because without bigger spaces for species to their gene pools decline. And so you get edge of woods kinds of species, but you don't ever get a wide enough space for creatures that might be in the interior of a wood. So that's also why we like to try and connect the habitats, because it makes a bigger difference. So they have more space and more creature, and a better way to have a diet and a better way to mix a gene pool. So, yeah.
Awesome. And I think that you answered at least one of the questions that came in. There's 2, but so there is a map, so you can see who has these certified gardens. So you can go on, where do you find that?
There, you can find, well, so
Is it on the National Wildlife?
It is at the National Wildlife Federation website, but the way that I was only able to find it is if I sign in and like create an account, and then I could find it, but I couldn't find it. It's under the, so there's Gardening for Wildlife part of their website. And so their website, it has so much on it. Sometimes it's hard to find all the things because there's so much in there, but there's a Garden for Wildlife part, and then there's a community part. But the only way I could find the map that says like certified communities, registered communities, because you can register first and then you work towards your certification as a community if a community decides to do that. So they have that kind of with those little pin dot, the thumbtack pin things. And you can see that, but the only way I could find that was by signing up and putting my name in and creating an account.
Okay.
And the
But
other
if
thing,
you do sign up, then you could see who else has a
right,
list of places.
And one other thing I
Okay.
wanted to add was a number of individual certifications that you have to have is based on the population of the community, but like South Bend is over 100,000, so we would need 400 individual properties certified. But if we did it as St. Joe County, there's actually, it's still in the same, it would take 400 because that's up to like 300 and some thousand, or right under 400,000. So anyway, there would be a broader area if it was South Bend and St. Joe County. It would, so there's more folks to draw from, but it would still be the same amount of properties that would need to be registered or certified. So that was kind of, I was like, oh, that would make more sense, or another way to look at that, because you can draw them from all the communities in St. Joe County.
And last quick question, this should be hopefully a quick answer, and then we'll move on to hear from Mary. But do you have a favorite plant for attracting birds?
Well,
is there one you'd recommend?
I guess it depends on which kind of little birds that you like, or they love serviceberry trees, which are amelanchier. It's called amelanchier, its Latin name, but they like the flowers and they love the little berries, and the berries are really good. So you've got to kind of beat the birds to the berries. Yeah, I think what really the birds really want to show up where the caterpillars are, where their food sources are. So that Audubon website, the Audubon one, that one is particularly to attract birds. So if there's a special bird that you really like in your yard, I would consult that website and then work in that one, in that way.
Cool, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, and we'll have more time for questions later on. I'll keep an eye on the live chat on YouTube as people think of things, but we're time to move on. So we've got Mary coming up next. Mary, you want to give us a little brief intro as I pull up the start of your presentation? I know it's in several chunks, so.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Mary LaViolet, and tonight I'll be talking to you about the single use of plastic bags. And Krista is right. This presentation is in chunks. I got carried away. It was actually quite interesting. I learned a lot about this topic, and it's a topic I think that we'll be fighting for a very long time because it's just not going to go away. So I'd like to show you a video first, and it's not. I didn't say anything on it, so it's just a visual, and there should be music with it.
All right, so that's coming off of, if people want to go back and look at any of these now or share them out from our blog here, you can see the URL there and where these are all linked. So I'll go ahead and get your first video started.
Thank you. Thank you. It was really important for me to put not only marine life animals in there, but local animals. So you'll see the swans and the squirrels and of course the deer. It's a problem that is just not isolated on the coast. So it's really just everywhere. Okay, so let's talk dirty. So plastic is a miracle material. Plastic helped revolutionize our day-to-day living. Plastic packaging saves fuel and decreases emissions during transportation. Plastic water supply systems and plastic storage tanks provide clean water, free of heavy metals. Plastic products for medical applications contribute to improve health and wellness. And plastic is cheap, and because it is, it's everywhere, resulting in one of our planet's greatest environmental challenges. Our oceans have been used as a dumping ground, killing marine life. In cities around the world, plastic waste clogs drains, causing floods and breeding diseases. Consumed by livestock, it also finds its way into our food chain. Single-use plastics account for billions of pounds of plastic waste globally, and much of it is thrown away within just a few minutes of its first use. When discarded in landfills or in the environment, plastic bags can take over 500 years to decompose. So now the good news. A growing number of governments are acting and demonstrating that all the cities, whether rich or poor, can become environmental leaders. Cities and states are learning from the experience of others that have introduced bans and regulation on single-use plastic bags. This assessment analyzes what works well, what hasn't, and why. The assessment also shows that action can be painless and profitable with huge gains for people and the planet that help avoid the costly pollution cleanup. In addition, action will drive the kind of innovation that will help construct the future global economy that we need. This means the responsibility is on us to be smarter in how we use and recycle this miracle material. So where do we start? We need data. And when you have data on what your efforts are accomplishing, you can set targets and goals. And if you don't meet them, you can change the way you're going about it. So we measure and record sustainability to track and assess progress, to encourage and expand participation, meet and anticipate new requirements, evaluate sustainable trade-offs, find and address damaging methods, and even communicate benefits and goals. Okay, so how do we measure sustainability? Better yet, how do we measure single-use plastic bag sustainability? When people talk about measuring single-use bags and their impacts, the conversation almost always focuses on disposal. But the impact of single-use plastic bag begins long before disposal. The best way to measure the single-use plastic bag's environment impact is through the Life Cycle Assessment, or LCA. LCA gives us a full picture of the bag's impact through every stage of its existence, from birth to death. Birth. A bag is born when we manufacture it. It impacts in the making of the bag include energy for the processing, as well as the raw materials to make them, like the 12 million barrels of oil that are extracted through the use of drilling wells. But wait, that's not all. We need to consider the energy and the materials used to transport it to where you are, the consumer. Now, when you reuse a bag, you don't cause all of those impacts. So by using them again and again, it'll keep reducing the impact. So let's talk about the life. The life of the bag is a useful part of its service. For single-use plastic bags, the average useful life is just 12 minutes. Canvas bags are designed to be used only once a year. Canvas bags are designed to be used once a week for a year, replacing one bag a week or 50 bags a year. Polypropylene bags are designed for 2 to 3 years of weekly usage, replacing up to 1,000 plastic bags. Again, the more we reuse any one bag, the lower the impact of the bags that we have on our environment. Now, death. Here's where we focus on the disposal. Disposal issues include litter, deterioration, our waterways, blemishing our landscapes, and high costs for disposal and cleanup, of which amounts to $11 billion per year. Even though not all of that is from single-use plastics, it costs plastic bags. It costs 30 cents to clean up each piece of litter out of our cities, our streets, and our roadsides. And as a reminder, it takes 500 or more years for a plastic bag to degrade. So now let's talk about different ways to decrease the impact of single-use plastic bags on the environment. The three I would like to discuss are voluntary reduction, public education, and policy instruments. Voluntary reduction strategies are designed to persuade and educate, not to dictate. These strategies recognize and build on the complexity of bag usage, consumer needs, and the necessity for bags for impulse purchases and to manage household waste. Reduction strategies focus not on just reduction, but the reuse and recycling to encourage responsible use and minimize litter impacts. Reduction strategies also include a wide range of product stewardship activities focused on the 3 R's to shape and encourage the change in consumer behavior. Public education. This is vital and must be a part of the plastic pollution solution. The problem of plastic pollution has become a learning platform, one that can empower others to change agents in their communities. This action should include the education of stores and consumers that use plastic bags and their efforts and their effects on the environment. Lastly, policy instruments. Policy instruments vary from bans to taxes for both and/or regulatory and economic. As of January 2020, only 8 states banned the bag, but nearly twice as many have laws protecting them, such as Indiana. Early this month, the Washington governor signed into the law legislation that bans the use of single bags in the state, which goes in effect in January 2021. This also includes an 8-cent fee for paper and reusable bags handed out in their stores, and that fee will increase to 12 cents in 2026. So while it's hard to measure the impact of pre-existing plastic bag bans, some say the initial findings look promising. And a study in San Jose, California found that a 2011 ban instituted that there has led to plastic reduction of approximately 89% in the storm drain system, 60% in the creeks and rivers, and 59% in the city streets and neighborhoods. So while plastic products are everywhere, so we use them every day in our homes, our schools, our office, and during travels in between places. Our modern world has become so dependent on the convenience of mass-produced, readily available plastic products like disposable bags, bottles, and cups that it's surprising to consider that the world was once plastic-free. So as a quick recap, I like to go over their actions once more, along with the positive impacts. Krista, if you could please play the other slideshow. If you could advance it, thank you. So the 3 actions I really want to go over again are voluntary reductions, public education, and policy instruments. I think the most, in my opinion, is the most important out of these 3 is a public education. And that requires a gradual and transformational process, which is the key to changing the consumer's behavior. If you could advance the next one, Krista. So the voluntary reduction strategy can also hit the public and the private partnership. Basically, it's a promotion of reusable alternatives to single-use plastic baggies, like reusable bags. And again, its impact, if we keep using the bag over and over again, we're lessening the impact on the environment. Or how about having an agreement with like maybe Martin's, or like they do right now, and you get a credit on your bill for bringing back a bag or using your own bags. A voluntary agreement between the government and retailers to encourage them to voluntarily ban and phase out single-use plastic bags. If you could forward the next one. So some of the positive impacts with voluntary reduction, it allows time for population to change consumption patterns, which triggers manufacturer changes, which is what we want. It also stimulates businesses. And again, you have alternative to bans and achieves reductions in the single-use plastic bags. If you could forward the next one. Public education, very important. It's introduction of environmental conservation principles in school, and we can also have public education through social campaigns. So positive impact is this public education is the common denominator for any of the successes in any initiative. So it's very, very, very important. Thank you. So lastly, policy instruments, and this just is so simple. It's just maybe a ban or a levy on any of the plastic bags that we as a consumer uses. And it also extended the producer responsibility. So it makes manufacturers accountable for the crappy environment. If you want to go ahead and forward the next one. So the positive impacts for the policy instrument, it's so simple to introduce. You're just going to charge them. It can reduce amount of single-use plastic bags, and you know what? It generates short-term income, and who doesn't love money? And its dissuasive effect leading to behavioral change is what we want, and it fosters business responsibility. If you could forward the next. So I will also end this with a quote. The earth is what we all have in common. So thank you, everyone.
Hey, I do have some questions from
Awesome.
the YouTubers out there. So I don't know if you'll have a clear answer for these, but we'll see what you've discovered in your research and maybe some recommendations you've got. First one, does the life cycle analysis, does that change now that gas is basically trading in the negatives?
You know what, it's really good. Thank you for bringing that up, whoever brought it up. In the last couple of weeks, what petroleum companies are trying to bring back, and they're trying to go to the government to say, hey, bring back single-use plastic bags because we need, for several reasons, because gas is so cheap, it's the best alternative right now. So yes, they are using this virus to their advantage and telling the government we really need to really utilize all the single bags that we can, the single-use plastic bags that we can. So yes, stupid virus.
Okay. The other question is, what do you think is more effective, a ban or a fee or a credit for bringing your own bag?
Well, I mean, I think any money in our pockets an advantage. And another thing, all of them have their advantages. Again, if you get a fee, it's going to be short income. A ban, I'm going to be screwed if I go to the grocery store and then I have to pay out money. So lesson learned. And again, I like to, when I check out, I like coupons and stuff. So I wouldn't mind a credit on my account either if I bring my own bags. So it kind of depends on what the goal is. So if you're looking for short term, put a fee on it.
Well, that's a good clarification, and I thought you did a nice job of outlining, like, first you might want to try this and then this, but what are you really trying to get out of it? I think that's a good point. Short term, long term, what's going to work. So cool. Any other questions from classmates? Last post, check for YouTube. I don't see any others yet. But if there are any more that come up, we'll circle back to them because
Thank you.
We've got more. Well done.
Thanks.
Let's see here. So it looks like we've got Stephanie coming up next. Do you want to say anything to set this up as I begin to pull the screen up?
Sure. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do this semester because it was my very first sustainability class I've ever taken. And I started doing some research just on some different topics. And I found out that Americans, we waste 40% of our food. And that I've seen the average between 1 in 7 and 1 in 8 Americans don't have enough food to eat. So that was something I wanted to put out there. So, and why I find it interest in the subject.
Okay, well, let's see the presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Sword, and I'm going to speak with you today about sustainable food waste on campus. So at the beginning of the semester, I wasn't sure what I was going to do my research on. I had never taken a sustainability class and was not aware of the magnitude of food waste in the United States as well as globally. I started reading and researching and learning that food waste was not something we as a society can fix overnight. After finding out there is enough food in the United States to feed every single person, and we have 42 million Americans with an additional 10 million children that are food insecure, I was curious as to why. And so I started to dig a little deeper and to see how food waste was impacting our local economy, our local community, and our local society. And I found out that over 39,000 adults and 1 in 4 children in the South Bend, Michiana area go to bed hungry. So after I found this out, I decided I wanted to do my research this semester on food waste because I do not believe that this is something that I can be okay with. And I wanted to bring it to everyone else's attention. So food waste is so important that it actually is fits into number 12, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. And what that is that number 12, the goal is to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Sustainable consumption and production is about promoting resources and energy efficiency, sustainable infrastructure, and providing access to basic services, green and decent jobs, and a better quality of life. And that is plain and simple. It's a universal right for every individual. And it fits right there into number 12. Now, this is another reason that I found was really interesting after I started kind of going through food research and food waste, and that in 2015, the USDA joined with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to set a goal to cut our nation's food waste by 50% by the year 2030. Now, what is different between the United Nations and the United States of America is that America has only 5 goals, which these 5 goals are imperative that we look at and improve. And so this is another sound reason why food waste we need to get under control and take a real hard look at to what's going on. And then I came across food waste and colleges and university demographic. And this slide, what it's telling you is that we spend a huge amount of money, and there are an incredibly amount of students that are food insecure at this level. And 22 million pounds, let me say that again, 22 million pounds of food are wasted on college campuses yearly. And that the average college student wastes 142 pounds of food yearly. This is where it really hits home, is that 25% of college students on average college campuses are food insecure, with 20% at university level. So there are 25% of the student population at IUSB that is food insecure. That to me hits home, knowing that that's something in my backyard. So that is another reason. And we've kind of discussed that the goal for the United States, and what I would like to discuss is that how IUSB can directly help with reaching this goal through implementing additional food waste reduction strategies on campus. There we can feed the hungry, save money, and protect the environment. Food waste is not one solution. It's all encompassing. It's a holistic view of what sustainability is, which is the economy, the environment, and it's social. So we can break that down. And if it's social, it could be basically impacted by how much money someone has. Where can they go out to eat? Or is it environment where they live and they don't have access to food? It's just food waste is environmental loss, it's economic loss, and it's socially unjust. There's no way of arguing this any other way. So what my recommendations are that we can look at a sustainable food campus is that there's three that we can do here at IUSB. And we can reduce food waste through food donations. We can address the issue of food waste by food sustainability and food security by starting a local food recovery network, which is student ran, and also has the opportunity for a brand new tool that can be utilized with Sodexo that will help us with technology be able to pinpoint where that food waste is coming from. So I'm going to go ahead and explain those a little bit more in depth. And what it is though, the first one, IU South Bend can help reduce food waste, and it has opportunity through food donation. This can be accomplished through community partnership. IUSB would work with Cultivate Food Rescue to donate food waste to South Bend and the greater Michiana area. And number two recommendation is IU South Bend can reduce food waste, food sustainability, and food security, and address those also by starting a local food recovery network student chapter. The Food Recovery Network is a national nonprofit that unites students at colleges and universities to fight food waste and hunger by recovering perishable food that would otherwise go to waste from their campus dining halls and donating those in need. The largest movement fighting hunger and the food waste in the United States. This educational experience serves as a competitive recruitment aspect to the environmentally aware student and possibly help with higher retention rates. My daughter is a junior at Penn High School, and she is in environmental science. She is looking at universities that have sustainable environmental and outreach type of community service projects. She and her other friends are very environmentally aware. She knows more than I do when it comes to the subject. And I'm noticing that they have a sense of community within themselves or among themselves. And also the research that I had conducted, that this is something that this demographic is very interested in, that they are looking at places that are doing outreach and community and are doing environmental sustainable strategies. So the next one is IUSB can address food waste through a new smart campus investment, reduce food waste through this new tool. And then it's called the Lean Path, Waste Watch tool through Sodexo to help IU South Bend prevent up to 50% of the current food waste through technology. So Sodexo can capture the food waste data, giving clear insight into what's being wasted in the kitchen and where the food's being trashed, out in the dining areas. And IUSB can use that data to drive cultural and behavioral change so we can see where the breakdowns are as to where the food waste is coming from. And we can do a cultural shift. We can do educational outreach toward the campus. We can empower our students to be part of the community by increasing their awareness of what happens when food goes to landfills instead. So that's something that can be very powerful in the change of culture is by this tool. And so the strategies to reduce the food waste we've talked about is my recommendations, and also by improving on sustainable food management already in place, by practicing, by prioritizing, by preventing and diverting. And the three key elements that we can use across our campus is reduce, reuse, and recycle. And that is something that we can install in every single one of us to help make that change and switch to food waste no longer being a global issue. And so my call to action and what we can do is that we can form a committee or task force on food waste. And we get together once a month. We discuss ideas, strategies, and also what's not working to keep the ball rolling and the momentum. And then connect with Food Waste Reduction Network to start student chapter. This is very, very powerful. There was a study done with Arizona State University that in the first year that they utilized this program, they saved 82 pounds of food. And then develop a collective strategy. We're going to set clear goals, integrate food waste reduction goals into already the campus sustainability plan. We're going to work with Sodexo to examine best options for reducing portion sizes, establish a redistribution and food waste collection system to service our already food injustice students, and then also connect or expand the food waste reduction strategy to overall waste reduction strategy. And work with the administration, professors to integrate food waste reduction into educational outreach experiences, and bringing that education into the community to help the consumer and bring awareness to how the average person can stop food waste, even at the home level, and give them tips and become very involved with being an active role in our community with that. And also attend annual food waste conferences so we can get how everyone else is doing that, build those relationships, and also get students involved through these types of chapters and conferences that we can do to start something new. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that everyone can take a little something away from this.
I actually I noticed when I was listening, it's the study from Arizona State University was not 82 pounds, it was 82,000 pounds. So that's quite a big difference. Yeah, so I just go up. So I wanted to let everybody know that it wasn't just 82. So that's a really, really great tool to be able to measure where the food, I'm really excited to be able to see how that goes.
So actually had a question about some data, two questions actually. Sure. So far. There's a statistic, maybe somewhere in the middle of your presentation, about food insecure. And the question is, what's the difference between 25% versus 20% university student food insecure?
Sure. What the research came out and said, it's a little different. The college campus, which would be more of like IUSB, more of a community type of campus, that's the difference compared to a university. And possibly with being at a university, they have the dorms and they can eat all their food, and they've got that situated when they go to live there, but not necessarily on a college campus. That's not always the case. So that's the difference in those. So a smaller compared to a larger.
So maybe more of that residential versus commuter, you're going to have some different food insecurity levels.
Correct. Yeah. Because they would set up their food already purchased before they go, and they can do that too, also through like their financial aid at a campus that they stay at, a university, compared to a local.
Cool. Another question, interest in that Lean Path program. What is the technology that they're using?
The Lean Path is actually that's the actual technology that is being used. And at the end of my slide, I believe I had linked the that you could go and research that, because it's something that is very cool. And so Sodexo recently has started working with Lean Path, which is a technology, what's called Waste Watch. Lean Path, what they'll do is they'll measure, there's different levels, but they can measure the food even at the waste basket. That will tell how much is getting thrown away. In the cafeteria, what they can go ahead and put in how much that they're throwing away, or if they are throwing away by mistake. So it has all of these different things that are very easy to look at and figure out where the problem is coming from. So on the back, I'm almost positive, and but on the back of my presentation, there should be a link. So if you wanted to dig in there deeper, but it's a new technical tool that Sodexo is working with now. If that answers the question.
And I'll pull up that website again so you can revisit these, find the links, find more information, and look over these after this evening. So last question, and then any more that come in we'll capture at the end, because we want to get through everybody roughly on time. This one is, have you seen, Stephanie, any behavioral studies, whether allowing people to serve themselves, like on a salad bar, or helping themselves to the food, versus being served like they do at IU South Bend, where they give you the plate with your stir fry or whatever it is?
Yeah,
what results in less food waste?
I don't know the actual percentage of it, but there are results out there that talks about in regards to allowing someone like at a buffet, and that the food waste is it's higher than it is if someone would plate you, basically. And that's one of the strategic recommendations, is that just the overabundance of putting too much food on the plate. So what they're studying is how they can reduce that, because a lot of times that extra food just sits out there. So that's another study that they can go ahead and look at, even through that tool. They can figure that out, like what they need to do. But that definitely, people are doing a lot more waste in regards to the buffet. But I'm sorry, I do not know that actual number. I didn't dive that deep.
And lots of interesting points of waste there too. So that's another interesting thing to consider. So thank you, Stephanie. And if anything else comes in for Stephanie, we'll pull that up at the end, but we're gonna move right along to Alexis. So Alexis, you wanna set us up while I get our screens ready to share?
I was just gonna say that this is the product of not just my research for this class, but also the work that I've been doing for the Center for Future. So I've spent the entire semester meeting with different people from different areas of the university. So just a thank you to everyone that met with me.
So just a quick note again, measuringsustainability.blogspot.com. You can find all these presentations available, the links to take you back to visit them more in depth if you like. Share them out with whoever you think might be interested. But I'm going to go ahead and pull up the Campus Pride page, and you've got a presentation here. So should we just get going, or anything else?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Hello everyone and welcome. I'm going to be talking today about my research from this semester, which has been on improving campus climate for LGBTQ students in higher education using the Campus Pride Index. So we're going to start off today by talking about social sustainability and what it means to create a campus climate. We'll move then into the origins of Campus Pride as a nonprofit, and then their construction of the Campus Pride Index. We'll follow that up by who is using it, why, and how it works, and we'll end this discussion talking about the results from IU South Bend, the practical applications, and my final thoughts and evaluation. Social sustainability is probably the term with the least definition and is the most misunderstood compared to its environmental and economic counterparts just because of its attention or lack thereof in public dialogue. So I found this definition from Western Australia's Council of Social Services that says social sustainability occurs when the formal and informal processes, systems, structures, and relationships actively support the capacity of current and future generations to create healthy and livable communities. Socially sustainable communities are equitable, diverse, connected, and democratic, and provide a good quality of life. So there's a lot of different topics that fall under this that people don't realize are social sustainability, but those include social equality, livability, social support, human rights, labor rights, social responsibility, community resilience, social justice, mental and physical health, and social climate. So this feeds almost directly into social climate, which for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to be defining it as attitudes, behaviors, standards, practices of employees and students of an institution, particularly those related to access, inclusion, and respect for individual group needs, abilities, and potential. So this is important for a lot of different reasons. I pulled a couple from the Human Rights Campaign, but there's all kinds of information on this out there. But LGBTQ youth are more likely to struggle with mental health. They're twice as likely to feel suicidal and 4 times as likely to attempt suicide. And these can stem from issues such as restroom access, which have a profound effect on transgender youth. All of this feeds into the student as they grow older because LGBTQ adults are more likely than others to have mental health and substance abuse issues. So overall, you could argue that these things are linked highly to student success, and they're also essential to maintaining a sustainable community like we have talked about. So the Campus Pride is a national nonprofit organization created by a man named Shane Winmeyer. It was originally established in 2001 so that LGBTQ youth could find supportive colleges and universities, with the primary objective being to develop necessary resources, programs, and services to support LGBTQ and ally students in creating safer, more inclusive colleges and universities. So they thought that this would be a way to hold higher education administration responsible and provide some accountability in an LGBTQ affirming environment. So all of these things helped to launch the creation of the Campus Pride Index, or CPI, which was created in 2007 in response to the increasing demand for tools and resources to support campuses in assessing their policies, programs, and practices. And it was managed by an advisory board which continues to oversee the index with annual reviews based on new research as it's released. So it assesses 8 factors, which we will get into in a little bit. But first, I wanted to take a minute to look at the 5 primary goals that guided the construction and use of the CPI. So number 1 was to set forth a national standard of LGBTQ inclusive benchmarks when it comes to policies, programs, and practices. 2, to offer an ongoing effective measurement tool to improve the quality of life for LGBTQ and ally people on campus. 3, to provide an accessible online tool for prospective students and families, as well as high school guidance counselors to search LGBTQ-friendly campuses. 4, to support campuses in recruitment and retention efforts for LGBTQ students, faculty, and staff. And 5, to advocate nationally for further LGBTQ and ally progress by highlighting positive efforts. So currently there are more than 235 colleges and universities that participate in the CPI. It is completed by a campus official familiar with the LGBTQ policies and practices, and the assessment is then submitted, and the official receives a free confidential report of the index tool and recommendations for improvement. The school additionally will receive a score that is set using a 5-star rating system, and the score and basic info submitted are publicly posted unless you choose to opt out. So for some campuses, the CPI illustrates to prospective students how a campus is supporting LGBTQ initiatives and may serve as a recruitment tool, but for others, it may provide campus administrators with data on where they need to improve their services, policies, and programs to better serve their students. So with my work for the Center for a Sustainable Future here at IUSB, I had the opportunity to act as the campus official and track down all of this information and get it submitted for us. So this is a screenshot taken from the live page where all of our information is published. So you can see that we have scored for sexual orientation a 3.5 out of 5, and for gender identity and expression a 3.5 out of 5. So the 8 categories that is based on then is policy inclusion, support and institutional commitment, academic life, student life, housing and residence life, campus safety, counseling and health, and then recruitment and retention efforts. So I'm going to break each of those down, and we're going to go through them a little bit more in depth, and then we'll continue at the end there by talking about the application of this and my evaluation of this as a tool. So for policy inclusion, IUSB does have a non-discrimination statement that is inclusive of sexual orientation as well as gender identity and expression. And both of those terms are labeled and explicitly defined within the non-discrimination statement. Our health insurance coverage for employees covers a same-sex partner. We also have accessible, simple processes for students to change their name on campus, which is called the preferred name policy, and enables a student to change their name everywhere except email address. We have a simple process for students to change their gender identity as well, and you have the option to self-identify sexual orientation or gender identity on your admission application. The only thing that we don't have is sexual orientation because IU-wide that information's not collected. So while we do have, for support and institutional commitment, a resource center or office with responsibilities for LGBTQ students, we don't have this as a separate office. It's along with a couple other offices within the administration building, but the needs are still being met, so that is checked off. We don't have paid staff with responsibilities for LGBTQ support services in the way that they define it, so I couldn't check that off. But we do have the Campus Ally Network, which is a big part of all of this. And they do a lot of ally program and safe space training for everyone all across the institution. The only concerns that I had with this is that it's not required for all faculty and employees, and it's not institutionalized. So this is run entirely by faculty volunteers, and if they decide that they no longer want to carry the weight of organizing and planning this, then it will cease to exist. So that was a pretty big concern that I had. We also didn't check off for family bathrooms, and that one's not pictured here as one of the main ones. We have gender inclusive and family bathrooms, but it's not policy. So those could disappear at any time. We're also missing an LGBTQ alumni group. We have one that's IU-wide, but not IUSB specific. And our standing advisory committee is not one that deals specifically with LGBTQ issues. So our LGBTQ studies for academic life is part of the Women and Gender Studies program, and there are a lot of well-supported and just awesome variety of courses that cover sexuality and gender within Women and Gender Studies. But we don't have that as a separate program, so that's just important to note. We're not currently actively recruiting faculty for LGBTQ related scholarship. We don't have an LGBTQ faculty or staff organization, but we do have training opportunities, which is the Campus Ally Network I mentioned previously, that talks about gender orientation and gender identity issues for those that are interested. As far as resources go for the library and such, we are able to access all things that are IU-wide, so that gives us a unique ability to access information there because of the Kinsey Institute at IU Bloomington. As far as student life goes, we do have an LGBTQ and ally student organization known as the Queer Straight Alliance, and they meet pretty regularly throughout the year. We don't have a separate graduate student organization though, but graduate students are more than welcome to attend the QSA meetings and be involved with that. We do not have an LGBTQ social fraternity or sorority, but we do regularly plan LGBTQ social activities and educational events on transgender issues, as well as events surrounding intersectionality of identities for LGBTQ people. I know the Feminist Student Union regularly offers things like this as well. And our LGBTQ inclusive career services are also available. And I also want to note too, before going on, that we do have close proximity to the LGBTQ Center just around the corner from campus. So that expands our offerings and availability for events as well. Moving on to talk a little bit about housing and residence life. We currently don't have an LGBTQ living space or themed floor, but at this time, they're hoping to make that more of a direction they're moving in the future, just as the number of LGBTQ people in housing goes up. But we do currently have roommate matching for LGBTQ students to find an LGBTQ friendly roommate. We do have gender inclusive housing for new students, gender inclusive housing for returning students, gender inclusive or single occupancy restroom facilities or shower facilities as well. And most of the residence life and housing staff at all levels are trained through Campus Ally Network on LGBTQ issues and concerns. When I met with them over in housing, they did report that they've had good retention of trans students, and they have the largest documented population of trans identifying students this year, so that's great. Looking now at campus safety, we do have procedures for reporting LGBTQ related bias incidents and hate crimes. I believe the URL for that is report.iu.edu, and that can be used for anything. We have active ongoing training for hate crime prevention, and this is something that extends not just to campus security, but a lot of other people as well. We do have police trained with sexual orientation issues, as well as gender identity and expression issues, and this all takes place through the Campus Ally Network as well as support for victims of LGBTQ sexual violence and partner violence. The only thing that we are missing really at this time is more of an active outreach to LGBTQ students and organizations. So that is something that could be pretty easily remedied moving forward. Looking now at counseling and health, we do have trans inclusive trained counseling staff, as well as HIV testing and safe sex materials available. I guess the biggest concern that I had with counseling and health was just the lack of support groups that are offered. Supposedly in the past, we've tried to get one of those up and running, but it's just been very hard to get it to take off. There are support groups that are available at the LGBTQ Center, but a lot of the ages on that are capped off at 18. So that really limits the services that are available for our older non-traditional students. And the last two, the health insurance policies, we just don't have student health insurance policies, so I couldn't check either of those off. And then speaking with recruitment and retention, I did learn that we target LGBTQ populations on campus, but we're not currently working to retain them. There was a question of how to target this demographic of people, because right now they're currently working to retain students of color or just those with a 2.7 GPA or less is their main target right now. We also don't have a mentoring program to welcome and assist LGBTQ students in the same way that we have mentoring in other areas. We also don't have a lavender or rainbow graduation ceremony that is separate. And we also are currently not participating in LGBTQ admission fairs, but we are still targeting recruitment for these populations in other areas. So all of that in mind, we are now listed on the official Campus Pride Index listing of LGBTQ friendly colleges and universities with a score of 3.5. So the Campus Pride Index results can be used for a variety of different things. First, looking at the fact that college choice can be really difficult for anyone, but especially for LGBTQ students, just because it can be difficult to navigate and figure out what kind of communities and cities and just areas of the country even are most affirming to LGBTQ and going to be able to support you the best. And currently, the Campus Pride Index is the only resource like this that exists to help make this decision. So it's a crucial part in helping LGBTQ students pick affirming colleges and universities. It can also help high school guidance counselors as they're trying to help other students make this decision. And for the institution itself, it can help in creating campus diversity. It can help with admissions and recruitment staff as they demonstrate support by providing data. The creation of campus resources as well. Resources generally serve for LGBTQ as a welcoming symbol indicative of a broader campus environment. So it offers screenshots into the different areas that we looked at to make sure that policy is influencing perception of climate. So I think that this tool works well because it provides a solid foundation to examine LGBTQ issues and, more importantly, to improve LGBTQ-friendly policies, programs, and practices. The lack of empirical research with this can make it more accessible and still provide necessary perception of climate, especially since this is one of the only tools out there that is able to make it so you can compare and contrast. It has quite a bit of shortcomings, though. I think it's definitely not a replacement or substitute for empirical research that is examining the campus attitudes and perceptions of the LGBTQ and allied campus life more holistically. Just because you have policy doesn't mean that people are regarding the policy or the campus climate of the students goes along with the policy. I also had concerns over the fact that schools can opt out of sharing their info online, so transparency is not required. So hypothetically, if you were to get a bad score, then you could decide just not to list yourself, which could hurt LGBTQ students in their decision making. Policy making tools also, such as the CPI alone, cannot bring about the
Gosh, it's like the gripping conclusion of the novel, and we're left hanging. It's so close to the end. Alexis, I'm not sure. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what. I think your video got tired or something. But is there anything you can add to kind of sum us up, since we can't capture quite the end right now?
Yeah. So basically, in the last couple of minutes here, I was just talking about how it's concerning that schools can opt out of sharing their info online. Because you can hide that you got a bad result. So that could hurt people in the end, instead of you being straightforward about it. I was also talking about how some of the wordings of the questions were a little bit concerning, just because it's hard to get clarity and they're so subjective. So for example, two of the questions throughout the report were like, does your campus have a significant number of books or periodicals in the campus library that speak to the experience of the LGBTQ community? So just kind of like trying to figure out how you define significant number can be a little tricky, because that means different things to different people across all of the institutions. One of the other questions that kind of bothered me was, does your campus regularly offer activities and events to increase awareness of the experience and concerns of LGBTQ? So like regularly can be relative, like you could offer one thing a year and consider that regular, even though compared to like IU Bloomington, it's not regular at all. So that, and just that it's on the honor system and self-reporting. So I was pretty critical of us as I was going through and filling this out, but for someone that was wanting to maybe manipulate it to get different results, it would be pretty easy to advertise something that it's not. So that was just a concern that I had too, is that it's an inside evaluation, not an outside evaluation. So that just might be something to consider as well.
So I see a question posted and maybe some more coming, but I have one briefly. You mentioned that some people could, you could skew your score maybe if you think regularly is annually, and another university might think it's weekly, so that could skew things. And that some people don't even put their stuff public once they complete this. But just for reference, are there other universities in this region that you saw on the CPI that might be like a competitor or another option for students to attend?
I mean, I believe Manchester is on there, and that's like the only other one that's on this half of the state. IUPUI is on there, and IU Bloomington is on there within the IU system, and they both have scored a little bit higher than us. I think Bloomington's a 5 out of 5, but Anderson University, I guess, is pretty close, but all of the other schools that are around us are on the shame list. So you can do with that what you will, but.
Okay, interesting. I just was wondering, I mean, of course, we would like to be perfect at all of the good, important things we do, I would hope. So we're not quite there, but definitely I appreciate your rigorous look at this and sharing with us what we are doing. It's really interesting to see. So one question that's posted in the chat is of the areas where IU South Bend scored low, if you had to identify one action that could be taken to improve inclusion, what would you recommend?
I mean, I think the area that scored the lowest was recruitment and retention. But my concerns with that, it's just that IU-wide, we don't collect any kind of sexual orientation data. So if you don't collect information and have it available somewhere, even as something optional that students can report, you have no way of tracking these individuals. You have no way of telling how big your community is to get more resources for them. So that just like that as a hurdle for all of these categories is really important. I know that we don't want to single people out and make them feel like they're having to come out or like that they're required to share this information at all. But for people that are willing to self-report and identify, like that will help in all of these categories, but especially when you are trying to retain these people and you don't know how to identify them.
Interesting. All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to hold off any other questions that come in for later because we're a little behind. I want to make sure we get everyone on here. So thank you very much, Alexis. Next up, we have Gabrielle with a very interesting tool to talk to us about. So do you want to say a little bit about this as I pull it up?
Yeah, so I'm interested in looking at sustainable education. So I found this tool that I thought would be very interesting and useful in kind of measuring how good sustainable education can be, and a useful tool for parks specifically to kind of determine how well they're doing and look at things that they could be doing better in their outreach.
Hello everyone, my name is Gabrielle Crutcher and today I'm going to be talking to you about the importance performance analysis. My tool is industry specific and I'm going to be looking at how I think the IPA measuring tool could be and will be beneficial in the Parks Department. So I'm going to be looking at a couple of different things. First of all, I'm going to explain what IPA is. Then I'm going to explain why it's important and how it's unique compared to other sustainable measuring tools. The third thing we're going to look at is its purpose and how I see this tool as useful and practical. And the fourth thing we're going to look at, I want to briefly look at a case study to see how IPA works, to kind of put in perspective for everyone how I see this tool being useful in the Parks Department. So first off, looking at what is IPA. IPA is a measuring tool that is designed to find the strengths and weaknesses of something based on consumer feedback. The tool was created in 1977 by John Martia and John James. They originally created the tool for corporations to examine consumer satisfaction and management strategies and management strategies for businesses. The tool was picked up a few years later largely by tourism bureaus and in the hospitality world because it's easy to use and it's very useful in finding better marketing strategies, as well as looking to find a particular competitive advantage compared to organizations that offer the same kind of experiences. So IPA takes takes surveys and from consumers and looks at their strengths and weaknesses, and the results from the surveys are plotted in this graph that we see here on the right side of the screen. On the x-axis we have importance, and the y-axis we have performance, and the results are plotted on the graph, and you can see where your strengths and weaknesses are. So starting in quadrant 1, it's keep up the good work. Quadrant 2 is concentrate here. Quadrant 3 is low priority, and quadrant 4 is possible overkill. So looking at this shows organizations where they want to put in more efforts or take away something that maybe isn't as important to consumers. I think IPA as a measuring tool is important and unique for a couple of different reasons. One of them being that the measuring tool is based on consumer feedback, and this directly involves consumers and visitors by measuring consumer feedback. Like we saw in the graph in the previous slide, you're measuring for what consumers see as important and what they see as being performed well. And these results give you information on what an organization can do better for consumers. So this idea of consumer-driven improvements based on consumer feedback. And like I said before, the information is graphed to determine an organization's weaknesses and strengths. And this information can be used to determine the best use of resources to improve consumer satisfaction and competitiveness over other organizations by allowing an organization to find their competitive edge. So this slide is an example of an actual plotted graph of information that had been taken from consumers. So you see the dots A and B are in quadrant 1, which is keep up the good work. This means that something that an organization is putting on is seen as highly important and is performed very well. But if you look in quadrant 3, which is low priority, this is an area that is has low importance and low performance, and something that organizations can look at and maybe consider sending their resources somewhere else or to an area that they could be used better, because it's not important to consumers to continue on with. Another way to look at this graph, rather than importance and performance, you could look at it as satisfaction versus dissatisfaction. And this might be an easier way to understand what IPA does and the kind of information that it provides. These kind of graphs, looking at it as satisfaction and dissatisfaction, is geared more towards recreation and looking at an experience as opposed to a product. So there are two factors at play when looking at IPA, and that's the basic factors and the excitement factors. Basic factors are what are called dissatisfiers. Basic factors are a minimum requirement of what is expected out of, say, a program or an event, and if this is not met, then the consumer is not satisfied. And the excitement factor is considered a satisfier because it increases consumer satisfaction. It's something that's extra to what a consumer expects. It's something that's not expected going into an event or a program, and it won't cause dissatisfaction because it's something the consumer didn't know that they should be expecting or looking for. So why is IPA important? So I look at IPA and I think that it would be a useful tool when looking at the parks department, whether it's county parks, state parks, or national parks. I think that parks have a unique opportunity and they reach a very diverse group of people who go to parks to enjoy outdoor recreation. And I think IPA, looking into consumer feedback, can really benefit from this. So first of all, like I said, they receive a variety of visitors, and each visitor is going to be looking for something different. So you have a huge survey vote to look at what your organization can be doing differently. And second of all, I think that IPA should be used specifically for education and outreach programs in parks, because you can reach people through education and outreach programs on any number of different topics, and you can, all the feedback that you receive from them can help you better connect with what visitors really want to see, what they're really interested in, to see what is successful and what is a weakness. So this idea of working with education and outreach program goes back to this idea of the basic factor and the excitement factor. You go to a park and the basic factor is going to a park, whether you're hiking or fishing or kayaking. Those are things that you know what you're going for and you know what to expect. But an excitement factor could be that education and outreach aspect. You don't know what you're going to receive from that or expect from that. But using IPA could help parks better understand and reach out to their consumers to figure out what causes that excitement factor and keeps their visitors coming back. And looking just briefly at how IPA works in action, as I said before, IPA is used largely in the tourism world and in hospitality, but this study was actually conducted by a Parks and Recreation department in Oklahoma. The study was done in 2003, and what they wanted to find out was how their community viewed their recreational amenities. So they sent surveys to 2,000 residents to try and figure out what they were doing well and what they could do better. So this is a before and after example of what kind of information is looked at and how it's plotted and how it's used once the surveying is done. So on the left-hand side in Figure 1, you can see a number of different topics that the Parks Department was curious about in seeing how well they were performing. Some of these different topics were educating residents about the environment, helping residents stay healthier, preserving natural areas, and enhancing family recreation opportunities. And then on the right-hand side, we see what the results actually look like when plotted in a graph. So it's about 50-50. You see quite a few of those categories in the upper right-hand corner of keep up the good work, but there's also a lot in the bottom left-hand corner of low priority. So this could be seen as you can take some of your resources away from things that are in low priority because they aren't as important to people, and you can allocate those resources elsewhere. So what do you do when you actually get this graphed and get the grid in place? The next step would be looking at real positioning, and this is how you identify the problem and how to fix it. So you can see in the upper left-hand corner that letter B, which is keeping youth out of trouble. Residents think that parks could do a little more to help keep youth out of trouble. So this Parks and Recreation Department actually took the advice of their citizens and what they were concerned about, and they ended up developing a couple different youth and after-school programs for children to go to help keep them out of trouble. So after looking at what IPA is and looking at an example of how it's put into use, I think you can start to see why I think it would be useful for parks departments specifically. So looking at Indiana State Parks, their mission statement, it says to protect, enhance, preserve, and wisely use natural, cultural, and recreational resources for the benefits of Indiana's citizens. And this is exactly what IPA is doing and can help parks reach their mission statement by providing feedback that would allow adjustments to be made in parks based on what visitors see as important and well performed. Results of the important performance analysis can help parks allocate their resources, whether it's monetary or manpower or time, in a way that is beneficial for the public and let the park best capitalize off of it and to better help their consumers and reach out to them. So that is how I think the importance performance measuring tool can serve and benefit parks departments. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Gabby. I did have one question come in so far, and then I'm going to check back after the final presentation for any other ones. And this has to do, it's a data collection question. Why did that city look at 2,000 people? You didn't say anything about the size of the city, so I think maybe some clarification on why 2,000, is that a magic number?
It's not a magic number. They chose a certain number in each different neighborhood and kind of averaged out how large the city was and tried to reach different neighborhoods to get the biggest variety of feedback that they could get from like lower income areas and higher income areas, so they could get a better, well-rounded survey.
All righty. And again, as questions get posted in the chat, we'll come back around to those at the end because we will have some time to touch back in. I know I've got some lingering things to address from all the presentations so far. So thank you very much, Gabby. And coming up next, we've got Jeremiah to close things up with a talk on Verma Composting. So Jeremiah, anything to say as I start pulling stuff up?
Hello. And once again, thank you all for taking the time to join us. I've been interested in vermicomposting for quite some time, and as an avid gardener and propagator of houseplants, I was interested in using worm castings. So go ahead and check out my presentation on vermicomposting. I actually created my own vermicompost bin after my research, and my attached infographic has some of the pictures of the materials I use. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jeremiah Sult, and today I will be speaking about vermicomposting as a greener solution to organic waste management. Food waste is a major issue globally and a large contributor to climate change. 31% of the overall food supply is wasted annually in the United States. Globally, 133 billion pounds of food waste is sent to the landfill each year. This contributes up to 18% of total U.S. methane emissions that come from landfills. Nearly 22% of municipal waste streams is food waste. If food waste were a country, they would be the third largest contributor of global greenhouse gas emissions, and this is effectively deemed food waste as the country of food waste and lost. So that leaves us wondering, where does this food waste come from? One form is in excess food, and that's food that is recoverable and able to be donated to people. This may come from restaurants or supermarkets. Another way is food loss, and that is unused or unharvested product from agricultural production. Another way is food waste, and that includes plate waste, spoiled food, inedible foods such as eggshells or rinds. The UN, in developing their Sustainable Development Goals, has targeted food waste as a part of goal number 12, ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. There are many targets that look specifically at waste management and food waste, such as Target 12.2, by 2030 achieve the sustainable management and efficient use of natural resources. 12.3, by 2030, have per capita global food waste at the retail and consumer levels and reduce food losses along production and supply chains, including post-harvest losses. Target 12.4, by 2020, achieve the environmentally sound management of chemicals and all waste throughout their life cycle in accordance with agreed international frameworks and significantly reduce their release to air, water, and soil in order to minimize their adverse impacts on human health and the environment. Target 12.5, by 2030, substantially reduced waste generation through prevention, reduction, recycling, and reuse. And composting, and specifically vermicomposting, can help us achieve this goal and these targets. The EPA and the USDA have also looked at food waste and have looked for ways to more sustainably manage food systems. The food recovery hierarchy was created by the EPA and USDA and prioritizes actions organizations can take to prevent and divert wasted food. Each tier of the food recovery hierarchy focuses on different management strategies for your wasted food. The top levels of the hierarchy are the best ways to prevent and divert wasted food because they create the most benefits for the environment, society, and the economy. But total food waste is impossible to avoid, and composting provides a final attempt to capture food waste before it enters landfills. Composting is a critical component of a circular economy. Nature's given us its blueprint in how to more sustainably manage our own systems. And in these blueprints are the planetary cycles, such as the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and the water cycle. And composting kind of helps us close the loop and mimics natural cycles in waste management systems. Benefits of composting include a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Composting allows us to recapture lost nutrients and biomass. Composting helps improve soil quality. It nourishes plants and the next generation of crops, further closing that loop. Composting further strengthens infrastructure and creates jobs. There are currently 36,000 people employed in the food recycling sector. By supporting composting, we can help support local economies and help promote innovation to lead us more towards the circular economy we all envision. Now, we've all heard of composting, but maybe you're wondering what is the difference between traditional composting and vermicomposting. In traditional composting, you combine organic waste such as wasted food, yard trimmings, manures, and you have to have the right ratios in piles or in rows. It requires adding bulking agents such as wood chips, and that helps accelerate the breakdown of organic materials. You've heard of the green-brown mix. Finished material must also be allowed to fully stabilize and mature through a curing process. Traditional composting utilizes high temperatures to destroy pathogens and weed seeds that are not destroyed through natural decomposition. And traditional composting is best for individuals with large yards or gardens, though they could still incorporate vermicomposting into traditional composting or use vermicomposting in other ways. Vermicomposting, on the other hand, utilizes the worm's digestive process to accelerate the decomposition process. By combining organic waste such as food scraps with paper and shredded cardboard and other forms of bedding, the food is allowed to pass through the worm's gut, and it provides a substantial end product called worm castings, which are easily harvested and ready to use. Vermicomposting requires significantly less space and less effort than traditional composting, so it's quite low maintenance, and it's best for individuals who live in apartments or have limited space, but still want to do something to reduce their food waste. Vermicomposting can be done on any scale, though I'm going to focus on how to do it at home. It can be done on and is done on an industrial scale, and they do this through flow-through systems. And there are businesses, institutions, and farms that are diverting their waste, everything from hotels to cow manure. They're using vermicomposting to speed up the decomposition process. There's also the commercial scale composting, where we have a rise of vermicomposting facilities that you can sign up for, and they will come and pick up your scraps and then drop you off worm castings as a finished product as part of the deal. Individuals can do vermicomposting in a bin or a box, and this is great for apartment dwellers, as the box can be stored in the kitchen, or if you have a smaller home, in the basement. Municipal facilities have been taking advantage of vermicomposting and been incorporating it into their sewage treatment and yard waste collection programs to speed up processes and provide more of an ecological benefit than traditional. Worm selection is very important in vermicomposting. There are many types of worms that prefer different habitats and have different habits. Epigeic worms are surface burrowing, specialized surface dwellers. They live in the upper layers of very rich organic matter in decaying litter piles. Aniseic worms are deep burrowing worms that live deep in the subsoil. These worms will not survive living in a bin. All worms are hermaphroditic, and their populations can double every 90 days. Their eggs will look like tiny straw-colored lemons. There's specific species that are optimized for vermicomposting, and this includes red wigglers, which are known by the Latin name Eisenia fotida, or European red nightcrawlers, known as Eisenia hortensis. There are various methods to worm composting at home. Here we will discuss a few of them. First of all, there's the bin. Bins can be purchased or repurposed. Worm castings are manually harvested through the top. Flow-through bins are similar to bins, but the worm castings are harvested through the bottom through a grid or a grate. Stackable bins have multiple bins stacked together, and they attract worms to feed upwards into the next tray to separate the worms from the castings. And the bed method is typically constructed outdoors with at least 18-inch walls or dug into the ground. These walls can be made with cinder blocks, or other materials can be utilized. Next, we'll talk about suitable types of bedding for worms. Suitable types of bedding include carbon-rich materials that have the ability to absorb and hold moisture while allowing oxygen to penetrate the substrate. Preferred substrates include cocoa coir, peat moss, shredded cardboard, shredded paper, shredded newspaper, leaves, straw, or hay. Any of these types of beddings will have to be moistened before added to your vermicompost bin. Now we get to feeding the worms. There are certain types of food that are great for vermicomposting, and that includes a wide variety of biodegradable non-toxic materials. Leafy greens, potatoes, non-acidic fruits and vegetables such as tomatoes, celery, green peppers, broccoli, low acidity citrus, coffee tea and grounds, rice, grits, paper, a very secure way to get rid of your shredded documents, shredded cardboard, cotton, and eggshells. Eggshells are great for vermicomposting, but there are some things that you need to avoid, such as non-biodegradable materials, any kinds of dairy or meat, anything that has a lot of oils or grease, butter, salad containing salad dressing, eggs, highly acidic fruits and vegetables such as lemons, limes, and oranges, hot peppers, salt, animal waste, plastic, synthetic materials, and harsh chemicals and insecticides. Maintaining the bin, it's low maintenance, but there still is some maintenance. First of all, you got to feed your worms every couple of days or weekly by burying the food waste scraps and other material under at least 2 inches of the bedding materials. And be sure to cover all the food with the bedding to discourage flies and other pests. You can increase bedding material with dry or damp bedding to maintain proper moisture levels, depending on if you feel that it's getting too moist or you feel that it's getting too dry. Moisture levels, it should be like a wrung out sponge, not too wet, not too dry. And you'll need to fluff and add to the bedding as needed. Many bins and vermicomposting how-tos will put holes in the bottom of the bin to drain the leachate. And I've seen some articles that even referred to this leachate as vermicompost tea. Now, there's going to be quite the difference between the leachate found in the bottom of a compost bin and what is actually compost tea, but this leachate does need to be addressed. Now, when you're storing vermicompost bin in the kitchen, I don't think you want to have the automatic draining happening out of holes from the bottom. The amount that you feed the worms, you want to go by weight or approximate worm count. And initially, as you're buying your worms, they'll be sold in a quantity or they'll be sold by weight. But there's typically about 500 worms and a half pound of food. 500 worms and about a half a pound of worms. Now, worms can eat about half of their body weight daily, so then you want to consider about a quarter pound of food per day. So if you're going to leave for a couple days or for a week, you'd want to factor that in by the number of days or by 7. Once you've been feeding the worms for a while, you'll start to gain worm castings, and these worm castings will need to be separated and harvested. And harvesting can take place through a variety of methods. That you can start putting all of the food on one side of the bin and hand harvesting through the other side. You can sort out your piles into smaller piles, and the light will actually drive the worms down deeper into the piles, so you can just collect the top layers until the layers get smaller and smaller and you replace your worms back into your bin. Or there's actually sifters out there that you can purchase or that you could make to actually run the compost through, and the sifting and the screen would actually catch the worms and the uncomposted materials, and through the bottom you would have your worm castings. Now, worm castings, you've heard me bring it up a couple of times now. What are they good for? How do you use them? Worm castings can be used as an additive to existing plants and soil. They can be added when repotting, transplanting, or preparing an area for gardening. They can be mixed in the soil or top dressed near the base of the plant. Worm castings improve soil health in terms of micro and macro elements, vitamins, enzymes, and hormones. Humus from worm castings extract heavy metals and bacteria from soil, improving a plant's ability to fight off disease. Humic acid in worm castings stimulate plant growth and never cause nutrient burn to plants. Worm castings help maintain proper pH levels and prevent extreme pH spikes. They also support microflora populations within the soil. Worm castings can help soil increase water retention. And worm castings can be used to brew vermicompost tea by placing it in a bag or a filter and straining it in water. Vermicompost tea can be applied directly to leaves as a foliar feed. In conclusion, when we throw away our food, we are throwing away so much more than just food. Reducing food waste will require cooperation from federal, state, and local governments, environmental organizations, communities, individuals, and the entire supply chain, but it's worth doing. Vermicomposting is an emerging waste recycling technology designed to address a broad range of organic waste for various applications. Food is the single largest category of material placed in municipal landfills. Modeling has shown that worldwide implementation of composting can reduce emissions by 2.3 billion tons over the next 30 years. Wasted food that is composted can be used as a fertilizer on cropland, improving soil health and productivity, closing the loop. 2/3 of the world's population is projected to live in urban areas by 2050. Many of these people will be living in apartments. Many of them won't have big yards or areas outside to compost. They're going to need vermicomposting services. They're going to need a home bin to deal with their own food waste. Implementing this composting method is a crucial step towards sustainability and creating a circular economy that involves everyone. So I'd like you to get involved, and I'd like to help you start your own vermicomposting bin. And if getting your hands dirty, if dealing with worm poop and worms isn't your cup of tea, then I would encourage you to sign up for a vermicomposting service, such as the services offered by Post Waste Worm Farm locally in our area, where they will come pick up your food scraps to be vermicomposted and will even provide you with worm castings. I would like to thank all of you for your time and patience in listening to me, and I would hope that you would all please see the attached flyers from our presentation for additional instructions in creating your own vermicomposting bin.
All right, fantastic. Worm poop, yay. We did have a couple or a question come in about worms. So they live in a bin or some kind of container, but have you seen anything in your research about trying to reduce the potential for escape and natural contamination? I know personally I've heard friends talk about their worms fleeing the bin for whatever reason. But the question posed is concerning introducing worms into natural areas like forests, because worms are great in your garden and for composting and using that the castings, but can negatively affect forest understory. So any comments on that?
This was definitely an issue that I'd remembered from my undergraduate studies about the effects they can have on the forest. And I thought that was an important thing with the drilling the holes in the bottom of the bin, is if there are holes in the bottom of the bin and maybe conditions aren't meeting the worm's needs, they will try to escape. And giving them the holes through the bottom definitely gives them a route. Interestingly enough, everything with that I've looked at about vermicomposting, nobody mentioned the issues with them being an invasive species.
So nothing, no comments on them impacting the understory, or?
I think that would have taken my research in a different direction.
That is true.
But no, I didn't bring up, there wasn't any warnings in any of the articles or websites that I seen that said, hey, make sure you keep them in the bin. So keep your worms in the bin if you make this worm bin.
Yeah. They're fun to play with, I hear, but yeah, not for escaping. So there's just wanted to share the quick shot of the information sheet that's available on our blog if the folks want to take a quick look at what and why. Pretty interesting stuff, and a really compelling thing to think about at this time where we're all kind of doing our part for the greater good. This definitely seems like taking care of our waste by composting might be something that we have the time and ability to start doing right now. I want to circle back to an earlier post and a question we didn't get to, and then just kind of open it up for the last few minutes of discussion to hear from you guys with questions for one another or other folks tuned in on YouTube. And that is, let's see, this goes back to the plastic bag presentation. So one came in after we moved on. So last week, I know you guys had presented at South Bend Green Drinks. And the comment was referring to the plastic bag presentation from last week. So they were inspired by something they learned in the discussion. And so someone in the talk said, oh, I don't get plastic bags even now when, they're discouraging you to bring your own bag to stores for the fear of contamination. And someone in the discussion last week said, well, I just tell them to just put the food back in the cart. And then I just take it out to the car. So this person wrote in and said, oh, I did that. I had a bagger put groceries directly into my cart. It took a minute to explain, but the bagger and cashier smiled. Brilliant. Nice. They said. And so next step, post signs. Because, if you could just say, hey, do you want your stuff back in the cart? Sure. Maybe that sign would help for that. So that's what.
In like Aldi's and stuff, they, they don't have bags and crap unless you pay for it. And then you can just recycle the boxes and put your crap back in the box and tote them all home.
Good point. Yeah, I mean, businesses can make that choice to give the bags out or not and put the onus on others. So another question that came in was about the parks instrument, and the question about the questionnaire. Is this a standard questionnaire, Gabby? Is this something that's ready to roll, or would each park or park system have to develop their own survey or questionnaire?
So what I found researching is that this tool is not used largely in parks at all. I've only found a couple examples of where it has been used in parks. There are a few standard ones that can be passed around, like tourism bureaus, like asking us like certain standard questions, or there's one that hotels use a lot. But no, right now it would be parks having to make their own survey.
So they would use kind of that scoring criteria, but their own questions on it.
Yeah. So I guess kind of the advantage of this tool, or disadvantage if you're just getting started, is you can gear your questions towards what you want to find, and make your survey about something specifically that you're looking into, but that can also be bad if you don't know where to start.
So I think I hit all the dangling questions, but folks on YouTube, if I missed you, please share them and I'll bring them up. But how about from you guys? We haven't seen one another's presentations until now. We've been talking about them in bits and pieces, but any questions or clarifications you have for one another, or just kudos, or I liked this piece of what you said, any comments from the class?
Yeah, I think everybody did a great job. So it was a great semester.
All right, well, I'm going to pause here and ask students to hang on for a moment, but have everybody say goodbye and thanks to folks that have been watching us live. We have had a steady collection of viewers, which we appreciate and hope that you all learned a little something and maybe we'll join us again tomorrow night. We've got another class presenting teach-ins. Tomorrow evening, there'll be 4 different projects being shared. So again, an issue that we're facing and some way that we can begin addressing that. So thanks to all of you in class for coming up and the hard work you put into preparing these. This was not our first plan of attack for this sharing, but I thought it went well. And thank everybody for tuning in and watching. So I want to say goodbye. Bye, YouTube.